India today stands at a critical crossroads in its economic and geopolitical journey. Around the world, trade tensions are rising, protectionism is returning, and old certainties about global supply chains are breaking down. Yet in the middle of this uncertainty, India has emerged with a bold strategy to diversify its global trade, reduce dependence on a few traditional partners, and create a more resilient and future-ready economic framework. When we look at the current global order, the United States has doubled tariffs on multiple sectors. Europe is tightening regulations on everything from steel to digital services. And China is facing its own slowdown amid geopolitical pushbacks. In this landscape, India understands one key truth. Survival and success depend on widening trade networks, building new partnerships, and ensuring that no single market can hold India hostage. Prime Minister Narendra Modi and his government have consistently spoken about Atmanirbhar Bharat, or self-reliant India, but that does not mean isolation. Rather, it means integrating with the world on India's own terms in ways that preserve sovereignty and secure prosperity. Over the past few months, India has accelerated free trade talks with the European Union, deepened engagement with the Gulf Cooperation Council, signed agreements with Australia, and even looked toward the Eurasian Economic Union, where Russia, Central Asia, and other regional economies are eager to expand trade with New Delhi. The ambition is clear. India wants to be a global hub, not just for IT services, but for manufacturing, pharmaceuticals, green technologies, defense equipment, and energy. One of the sharpest shocks came with the recent trade actions by the United States. Washington has doubled tariffs in multiple sectors where India has been increasing exports. This naturally raised concerns in Delhi. Would Indian industries like steel, aluminum, textiles, and IT services be hit hard? But instead of panic, India responded with strategy. The government moved to explore new markets where Indian products could find fresh demand. Already, we are seeing trade talks progress with Latin American nations such as Brazil and Argentina, as well as deeper ties with Africa. This is crucial because Africa represents not only 1 billion consumers but also an emerging global growth engine, and India's historic ties with Africa give it an edge. The reality is that global trade has become more political than ever before. Countries are no longer just trading goods. They are trading influence, power, and strategic positioning. China used trade as a weapon through its Belt and Road Initiative, offering infrastructure in return for long-term political leverage. The West uses tariffs and sanctions to punish rivals or protect its domestic industries. India cannot afford to be caught in the middle. By diversifying, India sends a strong message. It will not be dependent on any single country, nor will it allow external pressures to dictate its economic destiny. Consider how India is approaching the European Union. For years, trade talks were stuck. The EU demanded concessions on intellectual property, digital data, and environmental standards, while India wanted access for its textiles, agriculture, and IT services. Now, with new urgency, both sides are moving forward. Germany has signaled strong support for fast-tracking a trade agreement, and France has shown interest in defense and aerospace partnerships. If India can close this deal, it would open up a market of over 400 million consumers for Indian goods and services, while also giving India leverage against us tariffs. Meanwhile, Australia has already signed a trade agreement with India, covering sectors such as mining, education, and technology. This builds on the larger Quad partnership, where India, the US, Australia, and Japan cooperate on strategic and security issues. Yet, even within the Quad, India is carefully ensuring that its trade policies remain independent. For example, while Australia is a close US ally, India's engagement with Canberra is about securing energy supplies, rare earth minerals, and educational exchanges, sectors that give India strength in the long term. The Gulf is another critical arena. India imports vast amounts of oil and gas from Saudi Arabia, the UAE, and Qatar. But beyond energy, trade is diversifying into infrastructure, finance, and tourism. The India-UAE trade agreement has already boosted bilateral trade to record highs. And discussions are ongoing to expand this into a larger India-Gulf Cooperation Council framework. This would give Indian companies easier access to Middle Eastern markets while also securing investments for India's infrastructure and smart city projects. What makes this moment historic is the fact that India is not just reacting to external pressures, is proactively shaping its future. Every time the United States or Europe tightens the screws, India is quick to counterbalance by opening new doors elsewhere. When Russia was isolated after its war in Ukraine, India maintained energy trade with Moscow while also expanding ties with the West. This balancing act is not easy, but it shows India's unique position in today's multipolar world. Unlike smaller nations, India has the scale, the population, and the economic growth to demand respect from every side. It is also important to remember that India's domestic growth story fuels this confidence. With one of the world's fastest-growing economies, rising middle-class consumption, and a booming digital economy, India is no longer just an exporter. It is also an attractive destination for foreign investment. Global companies want access to the Indian market, and this gives New Delhi leverage in trade negotiations. Why should India accept one-sided deals when it can offer access to 1.4 billion people in return for balanced partnerships? Critics, however, raise questions. They argue that India still relies heavily on imports of critical technologies, energy, and defense equipment. They point to the challenges of negotiating with the EU, which often comes with strict environmental and regulatory demands. They highlight how the U.S. still remains India's largest export market, meaning tariffs cannot simply be ignored. These are valid concerns, but they underestimate India's long-term strategy. The diversification of trade is not about cutting ties with the U.S. or EU. It is about ensuring that India's economy is strong enough to absorb shocks, pivot when needed, and avoid dependency traps. In essence, it is about resilience. As viewers of this video, you might ask, can India succeed in such a challenging environment? The answer lies in history. India has always thrived when it embraced openness with resilience. From ancient times when Indian merchants connected with Rome, Arabia, and Southeast Asia, to modern times when India became a leader in IT and pharmaceuticals. The story has always been the same. When India connects, it grows. Today, by diversifying global trade, India is writing the next chapter of that story, a chapter where India is not a follower but a leader, not a victim of global pressures, but an architect of global opportunity. So, as trade wars intensify, as tariffs rise, as global powers clash, India is charting its own course. It is building bridges across continents, strengthening old friendships, and creating new alliances. The future of trade is uncertain, but one thing is clear. India is preparing not just to survive it, but to lead it. And that is the story of resilience, ambition, and vision that the world is watching closely today.